So go ahead and jump to your module directory, and in the steps folder, go ahead and open up step 2, which is a step for the trails.install file, and it's called install file scaffolding. Also, go ahead and open up your trails.install file, which will be blank right now. Go ahead and copy the code in the step file and paste it into your .install file and save it. Okay, there's a little bit of information up here at the top of the page that includes a link to the schema module and some information about what we're doing here. First of all, we're defining a function called trails_install, and this is an implementation of hook install. This function will run whenever the module is installed. So we would want to put things in here that includes data that we need to insert into the database on install. And then we have our Trails uninstall function, which is what runs when a module is uninstalled. In this case, what we're doing is deleting a couple of variables that we've set through our previous version of this module, and we want to make sure to clean up after ourselves. There's no automatic sensing of what variables are associated with a module when it gets uninstalled, so we need to explicitly delete those whenever we uninstall the module, and we would do that through the hook uninstall function. And finally, we're defining a Trails schema function, and this is an implementation of hook schema, and this is where we define our tables to be installed. So at this point, since we have our table structure already set in our database, we can use the schema module to create the schema for it. I'm going to go ahead and jump to the browser. And here we have the schema project page at drupal.org/project/schema. And you can download this, and it contains a number of utilities for creating and looking at existing schemas as well. Just go ahead and download the Drupal 7 version and install it like you would any other module. I'm going to jump back to our Drupal 7 site, and here I'm at admin/structure/schema/inspect. I'm going to go ahead and refresh the page. And you can get to this page through a number of different methods, but if you're using admin menu, it'd be under the structure section, schema, and then inspect. So you can see by the number of tabs here that there are a number of utilities available in the schema module, but the one we're interested in is the inspect tab here. And this one will show us a schema for any tables that haven't already been defined through hook schema. So here we have just one table right here, schema for Trails history. And you see we have some information, the description, and any descriptions here are marked with a to-do to indicate that we need to fill these in later. And then we're going through each of the fields inside of the table and grabbing all of the attributes for them and pulling them into the schema. Let's go ahead and copy this entire item here, and we're going to jump to our editor and paste it into our hook schema function. At the end of this, we want to make sure that this is indented properly. At the end of this, we need to actually return this as an array. So I'm going to go ahead and add return schema at the end. Now let's look at this line by line. We have our description, we have our fields, and then we have each of our fields. And this is pulling in a description with some placeholder content, a type. In this case, it's serial. Serial corresponds to a ID type column that's going to be auto-incrementing. A timestamp, and this is of a type int. And then we have all of our associations with types just associated with our columns all the way down. And finally, a primary key is defined since we defined a primary key in the database. You can go ahead and open up the next step in the steps folder in the module directory. Let's go ahead and jump there. Take a look at step 3. This is for the trails.install file, and it's called generate schema. We open this. It contains the same file that we've been building, except I've filled in all of the descriptions for the schema. So you can just copy this and paste it over your current .install file and save it. At this point, we're almost ready to install our module. But first we need to make sure that any tables we're about to add to the database don't exist already. And since we've created our table as part of this development process, we need to make sure to remove that before we move forward. So I'm going to jump back to my Database Manager program, and I'm going to delete this Trails History table. Now, if you're not sure if you have the schema set properly in your module file or in your install file, you might want to make a backup of your database just to make sure you have the table structure saved somewhere. I'm going to go ahead and remove the table. Okay, now I'm going to jump back to the browser, and I'm going to go to the modules page, and I'm going to scroll down to the Build a Module section right here, and I'm going to select the Trails module to install. I'm going to click Save Configuration. Okay, now that it's installed, it should have run the process of installing our database schema. So let's jump back to the database and scroll down to where the Trails History table would display. And sure enough, here it is. And it includes all of the fields that we wanted to add. All right, so now that we have the table, we now need to refactor our code to take advantage of this table. The first step I'm going to take is to refactor it using straight queries that we might use if we didn't have the database abstraction layer available to us, just to demonstrate the differences between that and the database abstraction layer. When we use the database API, our queries are going to look a lot different. So let's go ahead and start in familiar territory and move into that.